Hey everyone, welcome back to Shoebury Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Nichelle, and today's guest is Mark Love. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself as an author?
Sure. I started out always wanted to write mysteries, and before I got into actually doing that, I took a couple of creative writing classes at the local college, and I had a lot of encouragement from the professor there. And so I started out with the idea I was going to write one book and then try and write something else. And as soon as I got the first book written and it was accepted, the publisher started asking me, well, when's the second book coming? And I thought, I wasn't planning on writing a series, but the reaction was so good that I couldn't pass it up. And so I continued working on the Jamie Richmond series. I now have 5 stories in that have been published. And I
Nice.
also started a different series, which is the Jefferson Shane Mysteries. All my books take place in Michigan. That's where I'm from, primarily in the Metro Detroit area.
Nice. Nice. There's a lot going on in Detroit.
There always is a lot of activity in Detroit, and so much to see and do and experience.
Oh yeah. So, I wanted to talk about the Jamie, yeah, the Jamie mysteries. Am I saying it right? I think I
Right.
am.
Yeah.
Okay, the Jamie mysteries. I want to talk about that. So, in this series, how did you come up with the character development?
Well, before I really started seriously trying to write this, I had worked as a freelance reporter for one of the big newspapers in the Detroit area, and they called it a stringer. And I was assigned different city and county meetings, but I also had a crime beat. And so I got to go and talk to police officers at different stations and find out what was going on recently.
Oh wow.
And that gave me the inspiration for this character for Jamie. I wanted her to be a former reporter, but one that had done a lot of investigative work. And the idea was that I wanted her to be leaving her roots behind, but starting to pursue her passion of writing mysteries.
Mhm.
And the idea was that every time she'd be involved in a book while doing research for that particular novel, she would stumble upon an actual crime.
Oh.
And being a very determined, or as a good friend says, stubborn redhead, she would utilize her skills and her contacts and her imagination to figure out who was behind this particular crime and make sure that they were brought to justice. And along the way, with the first book, she also starts a romantic relationship with a fellow who is a state police officer, and that continues through the series. But the idea of taking my experience as a reporter and using that for this character, it just worked out very well.
Nice. So, what part of the book did you have the most fun writing?
Um, for me, it's always a challenge with the Jamie series because it's told from her point of view. It's
Hmm.
written in the first person. So I am definitely an old guy. And when I sit down and it's like I'm trying to have a conversation with her to get the story down so that I can capture her character well, her imagination, her expressions, her attitude. And that takes a lot of a shift, I guess, in my thought process to try and say, will Jamie really say something like this? And after a while, it's like, yeah, she would. So
Oh,
that's a
wow.
big
That's
challenge.
nice. That's nice. So, did you want to read a part of your book for the listeners?
Sure, I've got a scene from the latest book in this series. It's called Chasing Favors, and this the whole series mixes mystery with a little bit of real life activities. There's friends involved. There's a little romance that's going on with Malone. This is the fellow that she's been seeing. And so this is just a little 5 minute or so scene from this one.
Oh,
Sunday evening, I was expecting to curl up on the sofa with Malone and watch the football game. So I was a little surprised when Linda arrived at the front door with a garment bag dangling from her fingers. Jamie, you've got an hour to get ready. Let's go. She kicked the door shut with her boot heel. Her face was full of merriment. Get ready for what? Your date. Come on, I've got your dress right here. I stood in front of her with both hands raised. What date are you talking about? Linda pushed the garment bag into my hands and started toward the bedroom. Date night. You remember a couple of weeks ago when you got dolled up to meet Randy and his mom? Of course, but what? And Malone mentioned that you two should have a date night occasionally, where you get a little glamorous. Remember that? Kind of, but I don't recall telling you that. Malone told me. That's when we went shopping. She marched past me into the closet and started digging through my shoe rack. Wait a minute. When did you and Malone go shopping? Exasperated, she faced me. Last week. He wanted my advice on a new dress for your date night. One that you could wear a few times, like tonight and maybe for Randy's wedding. Now, will you stop stalling? What was going on? She took the garment bag from me and slowly unzipped it. Inside was a stunning black dress that would reach mid-calf. Dangling from another hanger was a small mesh bag. Linda pressed that into my hands. New lingerie for a new dress. I took the liberty of washing them for you. This is so unexpected. My voice was in whisper mode. Linda took my shoulders. You deserve it. Let me help you get ready. She was like a fairy godmother. Somehow Linda gently coaxed me to get moving. She styled my hair while I fumbled with makeup, perfume, and the gown. I was just stepping into the heels when there was a knock on the bedroom door. Malone, resplendent in a new black suit. Wow, Linda was right about that dress. Jamie, you're gorgeous. My face went red. Malone, I can't believe you set this up. I had no idea you were planning a night out. He escorted me out to the car. Malone refused to tell me where we were going. Instead, he lightly held my hand as we cruised downtown. I feel like a character in a fairy tale. That would be the gorgeous young princess awaiting the arrival of the hero. That's twice in a short while you've called me gorgeous. Better be careful. It might leave a permanent boost on my ego. Malone exited the freeway and coasted to a stop at the top of the ramp. You are gorgeous, Jamie. He steered through traffic and pulled up to the valet stand at the Whitney. Originally a private mansion for a lumber baron, it had been converted into a restaurant and a bar years ago. Rumor had it that the ghosts of the original owners haunted the bar. Inside, a young lady took our coats while another guided us to a table in the corner. Malone, did you rob a bank? This isn't a place for the cheeseburger after the game. Look at this menu. You knew the establishment was ritzy when cell phone usage was restricted to the lobby area. Relax. Don't look at the prices. Look at the options. But Malone, He reached over and squeezed my hand. Hush. He had one of those low voltage smiles going, with just a little spark at the corners of his eyes. Okay, maybe the voltage was a little bit higher. I studied the menu. It described options for a 4-course dinner. There was no rush to the meal. At length, he paid the bill. The valet got a generous tip for having the heat cranked up when he brought the car. Are you enjoying our date? Malone, this whole evening is crazy. When we talked about a date night, I pictured wearing a dress from my closet, not buying a brand new gown. And the restaurant was over the top. Did you win the lottery? I'm a winner because you're in my life, Jamie. There have been some tense moments, but those are far outweighed by the good times. For a year now. A year? A year! I'd been worried about it before, but had lost track of time, getting wrapped up with Randy's problems and Ian's tutoring lessons and the new book and, well, everything. But Malone knew. He pulled to the side of the road. 1 year ago tonight was our first date. Don't you remember? A year. Malone gently took my face in his hands. 1 year ago. We went to dinner, then went dancing. I remember. My voice tried valiantly to hide the shakiness of my spirit. Were you going to take me dancing tonight? There must be a club around here somewhere. Maybe a little jazz or something we can dance to. I leaned over and kissed him. I know just the place, the perfect place. He knew what I had in mind. Malone drove to the studio. He turned on a couple of spotlights while I keyed up the stereo. I selected music from the late 1950s. It was perfect. As the first song started, Malone gently took me into his arms. Happy anniversary, Jamie. I love you. My heart did a little jig. That happened every time he said it. I love you. Happy anniversary, Malone. I've never been with someone this long. He spun me away, then drew me back. Just keep in mind that every date night isn't going to be this extravagant. My heart couldn't handle this very often, maybe only once a year. This has been quite a way to celebrate, I whispered in his ear, my arms around his neck. Seemed appropriate. Want to try for 2 years? Oh, yeah.
That's really good. So are these audiobooks too? Because I would like to listen to them.
I have two audiobooks, but they're in the other series, the Jefferson Shane series. But these are all available as ebooks and in print copies as well.
Nice, nice. So, what characters in your books are most similar to people that you know?
Well, I'd like to say that I take bits and pieces from many people to create these characters. And it's funny because when I wrote the first Jamie book, I had a friend that was very interested in what I was doing, and she wanted to read a rough draft. And when I gave it to her, she came back and she gave me an elbow in the ribs and said, "You based this character on me." I said, "I did not." She said, "Yes, you did." I said, "Why would you say that?" She said, "Well, Jamie's a redhead, and so am I. And Jamie's stubborn, and so am I." And I asked her, "Have you ever met a redhead who's not stubborn?" And she said, "No, that's beside the point." So I ended up taking her comments and on bookmarks that I use for these different stories. Um, on the back of it, I wrote like the writer's version of the Miranda warning. It's along the lines of, "You are in the presence of an author. Anything you say or do may end up in a story." And that could change whether you have tattoos or piercings or whatever. So,
I like that. That's neat. So, this new book, the new book that just recently came out, and that you read from, did you have any hard time writing? Like any part of it was hard to write or anything like that?
yes, there were some scenes. This particular one, Chasing Favors, I brought back a character that was in one of the earlier books that Jamie had dated just on a vacation. And he comes in and asks her for a favor. And then it seemed like every interaction that Jamie was having with somebody, they were asking her for a favor, which led to the title of Chasing Favors. One leads to another. And it was one of the key things that I wanted was to have a little different crime going on. So I decided to have somebody that had a business that was supporting smaller nonprofit organizations and helping them to do their finances and the schedule of charity events and things like that. And they would actually be stealing from these nonprofit organizations. And I really wanted to get a little more insight into the background. I've worked in some nonprofits, but it's been a long time. And so I reached out to an organization called Seedlings,
Hmm.
Braille Books for Children.
Oh.
And I had connected with Deborah Bondi, who is the founder and the director of that operation years ago. And so I interviewed her for this particular book because I wanted to make sure I had the right details. I wanted to have the right background and everything. And with all of my books, I end up doing a lot of research. And Deb was so helpful when I was doing this. And then I thought, well, okay, now I have a better understanding. So I had the character Jamie come to visit Deb in the actual story and then use that as if she was conducting the same interview that I had done. So then Jamie would go to this organization that's trying to manipulate nonprofits and pose as a potential volunteer from Seedlings.
Ooh.
And that took some time and a lot of reconfiguring with what I had in mind, but it worked out very well in the end.
Ooh, nice. I can't wait to read this. I'm definitely putting this series on my to be read list.
Oh, I like
This
the sound of that.
this is really nice. And so we're going to talk about Jefferson. Can you pronounce the last one? Jefferson Shane. Shane.
Jefferson Shane, that's right.
Shane.
Uh,
Okay.
this is a character that is a little different from your standard police officer. Um, his backstory is that Shane was abandoned at birth, and he was found at the intersection, which is right near downtown Detroit, of Jefferson Avenue and Shane Street. And
Wow.
due to a clerical error, when the cops came and took possession of the child, instead of writing baby Johnny Doe, they wrote Jefferson Shane, putting the location down as his name, and the name stuck. Well,
Oh.
then the character was raised in a Catholic orphanage, um, and eventually became very interested in mysteries, went to college and studied, and then became a police officer. And he's a successful detective, but he's very uncomfortable with relationships. He has trouble trusting people, and it leads to a very good character. This is another part of the results of my efforts as a reporter, because when I had that crime beat,
Mm-hmm.
I would go to some small suburban cities around the Detroit area and interview the police officers. And I would see patterns of crimes that were happening in neighboring cities. And I would talk to the officers at the time, and I said, I see this happening here and here and here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you guys communicate with each other? And they said, oh, no, 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 no. We're very closed about what happens in our community stays in our community. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
to admit that this is going on. Well, that gave me the idea for a squad of detectives that would work for the Michigan State Police and have jurisdiction over the entire metropolitan Detroit area, which is over 6 million square miles, 5 million people, and so many different communities and cities and counties that it can be difficult to get permission or to follow an investigation into those areas. So that gave me the idea for the squad. And then Shane just bubbled up from there, and he became such a wonderful character. And he's got a real, it's kind of a melting pot of other detectives that they work together on it, but they all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they do a wonderful job.
Nice, nice. Let me ask you a question. So, what was the part of the book that you had the most fun writing?
Um, well, in the first book, uh, which is Y319,
Mm-hmm.
the storyline is there are three homicides that take place in different suburban cities around Metro Detroit, and the victims are all found in room 319 of these hotels. And the only clue they have is this message is written on the bathroom mirror using the lipstick of the victim. Well, one of the most memorable, the best character that I came up with is the captain that leads the squad of detectives that works with Shane. And I took this character and I transplanted him from the deep south. So he's basically an old Tennessee or a Georgia guy, kind of like a country boy, but he's here in metropolitan Detroit in a big city. And his mannerisms and his style is very different from what you would find in a traditional large city, because he's basically, he refers to himself as an old country boy. And he uses a lot of y'alls and drawls and everything. He messes up idioms left and right, but he's really a sharp cop and he knows how to get things done, gets results. And with this squad of detectives, they do very well on what's considered to be major case investigations. So
Nice. Nice. So, what was the hardest scene to write from this book?
the most difficult part was the investigations with the homicides, because I did a lot of research into old homicides. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to get information that I could, and tried to make it realistic. I do a lot of research in all of my books,
Mm-hmm.
and I want them to include details that make sense, that are accurate. And with all of my stories primarily being set in the Detroit area, I also want to use a lot of accurate locations that many of the readers will go, "Oh my God, I've been to that restaurant. Oh, I love that place. This is so much fun." And that was really something that I strive to do. So I do a lot of interviews with people. I think one of my most memorable was for a different book in the series. I talked to a lady that raises human remains dogs, or
Really?
cadaver dogs. And she was able to train them, and she works with law enforcement departments in the proper way to utilize these dogs. And that was a very interesting interview that I had. It gave me a lot of great insight into the character and into how the process would actually go. So,
Oh, wow. That's nice. That's nice. And you say you did a lot of research for your books?
yes, I do.
Nice, nice. So, do you want to read a little bit from the book? Or
From the Shane series?
yes.
Sure, I'd love to. This is from the second book in the series. It's called Your Turn to Die. And I may have mentioned before that Shane is a little awkward with relationships, but
Oh,
he meets a young lady in the first book in the series. Her name is Simone, and they start dating. And it's a slow process with Shane between his job and everything else. He's not a traditional 9 to 5 kind of guy. He's working all different kinds of hours and weekends. So this book takes place a couple months later, and they're still dating. This is summertime, and they're still getting to know each other a little bit more. So this is on a Saturday night. Shane's taking a rare night off of work, and he's taking Simone. This is the young lady that he's been dating, taking her out for a boat ride on Lake St. Clair. And again, they're still getting to know each other a little bit. Are there any nefarious tales I should know about? Simone asked. Define nefarious. Let's call it wicked or slightly illegal behavior.
yeah.
I paused. Just being out on the water with her on this summer night was enjoyable. I cut the throttles, slowing the boat as we glided back in the general direction of the house. The breeze ruffled her hair. Simone closed her eyes and tilted her head back, drinking in the fresh air. Well, it wasn't illegal, but it could have been slightly wicked. She bumped a shoulder against my chest. Tell me. Understand that the statute of limitations has long passed. You just said it wasn't illegal. It wasn't. Simone reached past me and pulled the throttle back, slowing the boat even more. Tell me. So I did. I was 16 when it happened. One of the benefactors for the orphanage took all of the nuns out to his cottage at the end of the school year for a day's picnic. There were a handful of kids who were brought along as well. That year it was cold and rainy, a miserable day. Everyone was crowded inside. The nuns were in their full black and white habits, the kids in jeans and t-shirts. There was one nun, a real taskmaster. Her name was Sister Columbus. She was small, but the toughest person I've ever known. Simone nodded and made a get on with it gesture. Turns out the benefactor had a couple of boats at the dock there. Sister Columbus had a brief chat with him, then came over and thumped me on the arm. Let's go for a boat ride. It's raining out, sister. God doesn't mind a little rain, Jefferson, and neither do I. Our friend says you can drive that little speedboat. When I looked beyond her, there stood the benefactor, nodding his approval. 5 minutes later, we were outfitted in windbreakers and life jackets. The little speedboat turned out to be a 10-foot long fiberglass hydroplane with a 50 horsepower outboard motor. The guy gave me a 60-second lesson in the controls, cast off the lines, and threw a salute. I motored out away from the dock, and as we hit the open water, a large yacht roared past. I paused in telling my story and turned the boat away from shore and headed south on the lake toward the Grosse Points. Simone rocked against me as I nudged the throttles for more speed. You'd better keep talking, Shane, if you expect any romance tonight. She tried unsuccessfully to say this with a straight face. Up ahead, another boat raced towards us. I shifted, letting him pass about 20 feet off the port bow. As it went by, I guided the speedboat gently through the other vessel's wake, rocking the boat back and forth. Simone turned, leaning her hip against my leg. I dropped one hand from the wheel and wrapped it around her waist, drawing her close. The waves we just went through is a boat's wake. Depending on the size of the boat and the speed, they can be quite large. It's usually a series of 6 waves, 3 on each side. An experienced sailor knows the proper way to take them, easing his craft over the rolling water. She nodded in understanding. The hint of a smile was in her eyes, tugging at the corners of her mouth, but she said nothing. So I knew the right way to cross the yacht's wake. Instead, I jammed the throttle wide open and raced that hydroplane over the first roller, through the middle of the second wave, and then over the third, fast enough to put the boat airborne. An incredulous look crossed Simone's face. You didn't. I did. Sister Columbus was screaming bloody murder as 100 gallons of water flooded the cockpit where we sat. As we crashed back onto the surface, I did the same thing on the other side, racing over the first wave, through the second, and getting airborne on the third. I gave the wheel a spin and headed further away from shore. She must have been furious. What happened? I shrugged. The last thing I expected. And when we came through the final wave, she jabbed me with an elbow. I figured this was when I would be doomed to hell, no matter what else I did with my life. What did she say? Sister Columbus merely pointed at the stern of the yacht and yelled 3 words I will never forget. What did she say? Simone repeated. Do it again. The feisty little nun was having the ride of her life. At her urging, we chased the yacht for about a mile, jumping through its wake from one side to the other. Eventually, we turned around and headed back to the benefactor's place. When we pulled into the dock, he was standing there, waiting to secure the boat. He guided the good sister back to the house, where several nuns helped her out of her sodden habit and into a heavy robe. A towel became an improvised turban. The benefactor found a sweatshirt and an old pair of jeans for me. All the clothes got tossed in the dryer. So she wasn't mad? Nope. It was the most fun she'd ever had. Later on at dinner, she sat across the table from me, still wearing that goofy turban. I got a big smile and a wink. I can't believe you really tried to drown a nun. Told you it was nefarious.
I love it. And that was from Your Turn to Die, that book?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And is that the one that's on audiobook?
Yes, that is one of the two that's on audiobook. That and Y319 are both available in audio,
Okay.
as well as in print and in ebook.
Okay. Okay. And then we can purchase it on Amazon or through your website, right?
That's right. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, they're all the popular sites that would have them.
Nice. So before I let you go, I have one final question. What advice would you give other authors who are starting out?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just write. Don't try and get it perfect the very first time, the first page, the first draft. You'll drive yourself crazy. And some people prefer to use an outline and plot everything out in sequence, even the scenes and the dialogue and all that stuff. Other
Mhm.
people, they refer to us as seat of the pants type writers. That's me. I cannot work with an outline. I start with a basic idea for a story and which character I'm going to use from the series. And then I just write one scene, and then that usually triggers an idea for another and another and another. Uh, I don't write sequentially. So eventually, when I've got a bunch of them, I'll sit down and figure out where they fit in to the chronological order or the puzzle, and then identify, all right, what do I need to do to connect this one to that one and have them all come together. So
That's really great advice. Thank you so much, Mark.
my pleasure.
I hope you have a great day and thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Brooke. Have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy the weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you all so much for listening to She Blurbs podcast. As he said, you can find his books on Amazon, Kindle, and Barnes and Noble, as well as you can go on his website. His website is motownmysteries.com. And let me make sure that's right. Yeah, motownmysteries.com is his website. And you can go on there to find his Jamie Richmond series and his Jefferson Shane series and his Motown Mystery News. Like you can go on there and see what he has upcoming and things like that. I want to thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate the support for my podcast. And I hope to see you next time for the next interview. Bye.